Hi, everybody.
Hello there.
Oh, you're
Back
not
once
Obi-Wan.
again. Yeah, well, we're back once again for another weekly podcast. Should be a fun topic.
What's our topic for today, then?
Well, you're hearing it right now.
I'm not hearing anything.
Well, our viewers hear it.
What do they hear?
Audio, sound. Oh my.
Oh my. Lions,
Because
tigers, and bears.
audio is everywhere.
Is it really?
Yes.
But what if you can't hear?
Well, that doesn't negate the fact that audio is everywhere.
You're everywhere.
No, I'm not. Not yet. From the early days of Pong all the way through now, there's been some sort of audio design in video games. In fact, Pong, that was one of the selling features of Pong. That and a proper scoring system.
So, audio is the topic you're saying.
Yes. Going all the way back to Pong, all the way up to now.
That's not entirely true, though.
Do tell.
There are certain games that are specifically made for the hearing impaired that don't have audio at all. I mean, it's a rare thing, but yeah, in general, yes, most games have some sort of audio in them. I'm not talking about special isolated cases.
And as it is, audio in most games today can either make or break the game.
Uh, that's true. Like, it would
Like,
not be fun with a game that every time you hit someone there was a fart noise played. That would be kind of dumb. I mean, sure, there's a certain demographic that would giggle and laugh at that all the time, but for the general audience, that would get annoying very fast.
there's so many different kinds of audio sounds that we don't even think of all the time when we're playing games today.
True, audio
Like
is.
ambient nature in games.
Yeah,
Like if you're just stop everything,
you don't
games
know.
that I play, I can think of the Forza Horizon series, and starting especially in 3 up through especially number 5 right now, they spent a load of time working on just ambient noise.
Yes. Ambient noise is something you don't notice until it's not there,
Exactly.
because then the stuff is just quiet.
And
Too
unrealistic.
quiet.
Yeah, especially for a video game.
Yeah, no, not just video games. It's just video games, movies, anything where audio production is involved. There's usually some type of ambient noise. Maybe not necessarily music, but even then, like there's all kinds of stuff that goes into making music and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I am
So
by no means any type of audio expert, though. I just know what I like and know things that don't sound good.
and it's fascinating how audio design for video games has evolved over the years.
Yeah, we've gone from good old 8-bit slash chip tune noises to full on movie production level audio quality in games.
Since you brought up the 8-bit kind of sounds, what sound effects from that time period do you think really made an impact on games at the time?
Um, Made an impact? Uh, well, like, for instance, the original Super Mario Brothers on NES, once the times reached a certain number before you ran out of time, the music would change to a more, um, I don't know, more upbeat and hectic type thing, just warning you, like, hey, you're running out of time. You got to get this done. It's almost kind of similar to combat music in some of the more modern games that, like when there's an enemy nearby, a certain type of music will start playing in certain like RPG type, exploration type games like Assassin's Creed or Elder Scrolls games and stuff. Like whenever there's enemies nearby, the background music will change from like some general exploration gentle music to like do 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 or something. Like obviously those aren't very bad examples of music. I don't do music. I'm not musically talented at all. But like
Don't worry, not all of us are.
that's true. That's very true. Even some people that make it professionally in the music industry, I don't think are very musically talented. But that's another topic for a different type of podcast.
Very true.
But yeah, as far as games are concerned, there is so many different layers of sounds. As you brought up, there's the ambient sounds, there's sound effects, there is soundtracks, and just the general music, which we kind of touched on a little bit. So it's a very
Oh yeah.
wide topic, and it's a lot more complicated to think about and implement in game design than average customer might think. Your average gamer who doesn't pay attention to that kind of stuff is like, as you said, a good, even just a good soundtrack can make or break a game. Even though a lot of people these days just also will just turn off the game sounds and upload their Spotify playlist or whatever to customize their own music. But for me, if a game has a good soundtrack, it's better than just listening to whatever I want on Spotify or whatever music streaming service I want.
Exactly.
Like,
I'd rather have good in-game music and
yes,
or world sound than bringing in my own music.
yeah, I mean, because the in-game music helps set the mood of the game. Like, I don't understand. I know there are certain players that will either just mute all sounds from a game, or like I said, just put on their custom playlist. Like there's certain games I will play. Like if I'm just running around mindlessly shooting things, I'll put on a custom soundtrack sometimes. If I'm playing like a shooter game type game with my friends or family or something, and we're just messing around. But if I'm like trying to actually experience the game, I'll usually listen to the in-game audio.
Like for racing games, I'll balance my music to the car engine and the world sound effects.
Yeah, like you were saying, like with Forza, how they have all those ambient sound effects. They've also put a lot of time into the engines and the car sounds
Oh
themselves
yeah.
to make them instead of just a generic revving engine like they used to do back in the day. They have specific cars make different sounds and stuff.
And even that they have not quite perfected all the way through yet.
Right, like it's
Like
a evolving field and technology, and some of that comes down to money and time also with game studios of how much they want it to sound exactly like the real version of the car.
I know for a fact that there's so many people in the Forza community who will criticize and critique anything that's wrong with a car sound.
Yeah.
Even simple stuff from the opening and closing of a car door. I'm like, damn, okay,
Well,
I'll back up and be like, hey, you want this better?
do it yourself.
Be my guest. Do it, yeah, do it yourself.
Also, people that are that nitpicky about the exact sounds or they bug me. Especially considering a lot of times in movies and game design and everything, like the sounds that they play are not anything like the real stuff sounds. It's like a lot of gunshot sounds are not actual recordings of gunshots or something. It's some other type of sound that sounds really close to the thing, and
Oh yeah,
it's amazing how sound effects in general, like that's a whole like field of study that people go into and
that's
everything.
an industry on its own, right?
It is sound effects, visual effects, all these different effects. Like, have you ever gone through and watched the credits in a game or a movie? Like the sound effect department and the visual effects and all that stuff. There is so many different people listed on those things usually, especially if it's a
Oh yeah,
major production. Like indie games, it's a little different usually because it's a smaller group of people, so you won't have a huge old list of people. But even then, sometimes it's like they'll you know credit other people that they got the sound effects from. Because I know that like
yep.
you can buy sound effects packages or stuff to put into your game, or you can, if you're really hardcore and into that stuff, go out and record all your own sounds, and that takes a long time. And it's the people that do
Yep.
that, they I'm like it boggles my mind that people have the ear and all that kind of stuff for that. And I think they do an incredible job and
I still
everything.
remember a story from the development of Forza Horizon 4, which was set in the United Kingdom. They're out on location one day. I forget if they were doing audio recording or what, but all of a sudden they started hearing sheep nearby. And they literally went and found the property to farm, went to the property owner, and was like, hey, we're out here doing this work. Could we record the sound of your sheep for our ambient noise? And they're able to do it. Like, wow. Not everyone will get that lucky.
Nope, not everyone will.
So, shifting focus back and forth between old
Why did it
games, new games.
shovel?
You mentioned Mario a little bit ago.
Denim, denim, denim.
What were some of the sound effects from that game that really stand out to you that you feel are still iconic to this day?
One of the most famous sounds is the coin collection sound whenever you collect a coin. The little ding or whatever it is. Like, I can't reproduce sounds on my own, but like, that's so iconic and popular and been copied so many times and put in other games. I mean, they obviously change it up a little bit, but like basically any coin collection sound in most games all have that similar little ding type of sound.
Made popular and iconic by Mario.
Right.
That's just crazy to think about. That just one little sound effect, and here we are still using it today.
And then there was like the little tune that played when you got the mushrooms or the extra life mushroom and like or any of the power ups. Basically, whenever you collected a power up, each one had its own tune, but they were all iconic. And most people nowadays, if you hear that tune, they will recognize it. Or the little song that would play when you got the star and you'd have the invincible power up. Whatever. I can't. I'm not good at, like I say, making noises with stuff. But
So, what games? Now, I have my list, but what games do you think have had the best music implemented? Whether it's the theme song or in game music or what have you.
um, I love the soundtrack in the Elder Scrolls games, and like especially the main slash title theme from Skyrim. It's a great one. I want to say it was Jeremy Soule who did those games. He was the composer for the soundtracks. Yeah, I could be saying his name wrong also, but yeah, he's a composer. He's done all kinds of film, TV, and stuff, but he's for me anyway. He's most recognized from the Elder Scrolls and Skyrim, and I believe he did Oblivion, and I want to say Morrowind as well. And just
Interesting.
like those things, like I listen to those soundtracks on Spotify sometimes just because they're so interesting and like it's great ambient music. It's great like the danger music, or when you fight a dragon, there's a specific song that plays and everything. And it's cool because like it's full on orchestra, choir, and they're speaking a whole singing. I mean, in a whole dragon language that they invented for the games and stuff. Like it's just really epic music. In fact, for their when they did the anniversary edition that they just released a couple years ago, their 10-year thing, they did a live concert of where they played the entire soundtrack, and it was amazing to watch and listen to and everything.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I know a lot of different movies and video games have had their orchestra music performances over the past, what, 10 years now? The first time I heard about something like that happening, and perhaps it wasn't the first one, but the first one I'm aware of was when Nobuo Uematsu got his Final Fantasy scores put together for a symphony tour. And I really wanted to go see it, but didn't have the opportunity. So
Right.
the other one I really wish I could have attended was for Jesper Kidd, who did the very classic Assassin's Creed 2 soundtrack, which really, in some ways, put out one of the most iconic songs for the rest of the Assassin's Creed franchise. The track Ezio's family.
Ezio. Yeah, that's always cool when for game series that has different composers in them, and one composer comes along and makes a great song that just resonates and is included in other games later, even though other composers wind up doing the main tracks for the rest of the stuff.
Oh yeah. Like for me, that music and all of the Assassin's Creed music just is so cinematic and matches each game so well.
Yes, I mean I know I haven't played all of the Assassin's Creed games, but of the ones I have played, like I've enjoyed the soundtracks to them very much as well,
But getting to the
and the sound
you go.
effects of the little hidden blade coming out, and the way you would just some of the little squelching sounds when you would stab people, and just like they obviously spend a lot of time and money in their audio department for those games.
Not wrong. Like those sound effects are really good. And I was just about to bring up getting back to the broader scheme of sound effects in games for audio design. We have so many different games. Today we have flying games, we have racing games, we have fighting games. We have games with all sorts of different audio mechanics put in. It's absolutely amazing how these things get recorded and synced up just right in the game.
Yes, that has to do with coding as well, is involved with making sure everything plays at the right time, in the right circumstances, and all that kind of stuff.
And also, how do you come up with sounds for things that are completely not even real? Like, a game that keeps coming to my head during this discussion is Sonic the Hedgehog. Think
Yeah.
about when you're using Sonic in, like, on the old school games, and just his basic movement and his powering up and charge roll, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and the sound effects for that. Like, how does one just come up with that kind of sound from nothing and have it fit this completely fictional situation?
To me, that sound reminds me of, and I'm not going to say it was or is, what it is or what, because I was not involved with making that game, but to me, it reminds me of like some type of drill or something kind of revving up, but not like a high powered, more like a small little Dremel tool type of revving, holding the power button. And so, like, they probably took something like that, modified it with whatever sound programs they have, and it's stuff like that. Like I kind of talked about earlier, like the sounds you actually hear are usually nothing to do with what the actual sound is. It's just like
And trying to make up a sound effect for something that doesn't exist in the real world, like coming up with a gunshot, would be a lot, to me at least, a lot easier than coming up with something that doesn't exist in our world.
true, but like taking your Sonic thing for example, like no, hedgehogs don't really spin and charge up real fast like that to take off running. But the idea behind it was, yeah, he's this little fur ball and he's spinning in a circle. So you just imagine what kind of sound something that spins really fast makes, and that's why it reminds me of like a Dremel tool or some kind of drill just rotating at high RPMs, kind of a sound. So
Or possibly even a car on a dyno.
yeah, could be something like that. Could be, anything that just has any type of fast rotation sound
Yep.
to it. Even like the little machine they put the astronauts in to spin them around to make them practice being sick.
Yeah, I actually wonder what you could do with that kind of sound effect. And
Yeah.
isn't it curious where we get sound effects from?
Sometimes it is very strange.
And sometimes it's very simple. Like, I don't think it's been used yet, maybe it has, but how about bouncing the eraser side of a pencil on your desk?
Yeah, I mean
That
they have been
that to
used for
me
something
could,
somewhere in the entire history of sound design. I wouldn't be surprised if it's been used for something that you would never think it was, but
like, I could see that for like a Pong type game or something.
yeah, it could work. Any type of
Or
yes,
or
like
a bubble pop game.
Yeah, sounds that involve impact, some of the actual sounds they use for them are quite hilarious. As in, like, hilarious as in, like, you wouldn't think that that's the actual source of the sound when you compare it to what they're
Right.
using it for. That's what I meant by hilarious. Not, I mean, sometimes the sounds themselves are kind of funny, but
Well, sometimes they have to be because that's what the game calls for.
yes, not all games are meant to sound realistic and stuff. They are meant to be humorous.
Cartoony.
You're a cartoony.
Prior to super, what we'd call cinematic music today, what classic games do you think had the best soundtrack in terms of music?
I mean, I hate to bring up Mario again, but that theme song will forever be a classic in my head.
Another one that I think about every so often is the music from the Legend of Zelda games.
Yes, Zelda has another classic soundtrack. I mean, there's a lot of those old school 8-bit games. Like, they live in my head rent free sometimes.
Which is perfectly fine.
Yeah, because, if I had to pay rent for them, it would suck.
Not wrong. What kinds of sound effects do you think are not used often enough? And or what kind of environment do you think are not built enough for sound effects?
Mm, I don't know. I can't make a real judgment call on that because the niche of games I play generally all have pretty good sound quality to them.
But like what kinds of games out there, or do you think there hasn't been a game that uses certain kinds of sound effects?
I don't know. I can't think of any, is what I'm saying. Do you have anything in mind?
Underwater themed games? Like what does water sound like
It's,
when you're in it?
it's usually very muted. Have you never played Subnautica?
That was one game I've not touched yet.
Subnautica, there's a game I play called Sunken Lands where it's what do they call it? Early release game, so it's not finished yet, and so they're still adding stuff to it. But there is quite a lot of it where you go underwater, and so like yeah, they do a good job of like yeah, it sounds like you're underwater. Like it'd be like you've gone swimming before, and when you go underwater, like you can still hear things, but everything's just like slightly muted and stuff because the sound waves do not travel as well through water as they do through the air. It's weird how that happens.
At least in the real world. For a video game where it might not be based in absolute reality, you could do other things.
Right, but I think if a game did something like that, it would just sound wrong to people and they would not like it. Just because of, even though, yes, it's set in a fantasy thing or whatever, like, there are certain things that people expect their comprehensions and their experiences to stay kind of the same. I mean, obviously, there are some things like the recent Aquaman movies or whatever, you can clearly hear them speaking and all the explosions and everything just fine underwater. So I guess it does make sense that the sound doesn't get muted like it actually would if anyone underwater was trying to actually listen to that stuff.
Or like moving weapons around underwater.
Yeah, I mean, one, if you were trying to make it quote unquote realistic, you would have to include entirely set of physics for underwater because of all the water resistance, which is something that I've noticed in like the RPG fantasy type games that I play, like the ones that allow you to fight underwater, because not all of them do. But like, yeah, the swing speeds on everything, it's all the same, and there's no difference. I'm like, to make this more realistic, it's harder to swing a weapon like a sword or something underwater than it is if you're not underwater, just because of the resistance and everything and all that.
Yeah, the
Water.
games I've played where you can use some of your weapons underwater, I've noticed that as well. But I also listen to the audio of it,
Yeah, like the audio
and it
would be
almost,
different too.
yeah, it
Or
almost sounds like it's the same sound effect, but almost with a washy sound to it,
yeah, I mean,
like it's
there.
scraping through the surface of water, but you're underwater.
Yeah, I usually try to add some kind of, I don't want to say splash, but a splash-ish type of sound to give
Yeah,
the water effect instead of like I said, in reality, it would one you probably wouldn't even hear that really. I mean, you might hear a slight thing, but like for a specific example of the sword swipe, like lots of games when you swipe a sword, you hear that little or whatever of the
yeah.
blade cutting through the air. Whereas if you swing a blade or something like that underwater, it's not really going to make too much of a sound. One, because of the resistance, you're moving, it's going to move a lot slower, so you're not going to get that cutting the air type of sound. And if it does make a sound, it's going to be definitely more garbled and or something, and just moving a lot slower. It's not going to be such a quick type of sound, if you get what I'm
No,
saying.
oh yeah, I get it. And that makes me wonder if maybe stuff like that could be the reason why we don't have more underwater themed games.
Oh, I mean, yeah, like sound underwater. If you're trying to be even slightly realistic, it just doesn't travel well. So like it doesn't. Yeah, it's a whole new thing. I mean, it's not as bad as if you tried to hear sounds in space.
Sounds in space.
In space, no one
What
can
does
hear
that
you
even
scream.
sound like?
Nothing.
You mean science fiction and fantasy have lied to me?
Yes, in space, no
Oh
one can
my.
hear you scream. Didn't you watch Alien?
Actually, no, I haven't.
It's a great movie franchise. You should watch
It's on my list.
it.
But you know that?
Have you seen Predator at least?
No.
And you call yourself a Carl Weathers fan.
No, I don't.
I know, I'm just kidding. Speaking of which, yeah.
So,
But yeah, he was in the first Predator movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
so, sound design for space games. How do you feel about that since we've established in reality there is no sound in space?
Oh, I 100% support it because it would be a game without sound and it would be incredibly boring and stupid and nobody would like it. Is it
So
real?
then, based on that,
Is it realistic?
do,
No, but there's a thing called suspension of disbelief where you have to be like, yeah, I want to hear the explosions of the Death Star blowing up, or I want to hear the sounds of my ship's lasers shooting and stuff.
so then would you say that given real world reality, do you think developers do a reasonable job of not overdoing sound effects in space, or do you think they go over the top with it?
Uh, that does depend. Some developers do a really good job. Others try to put too much stuff into their sounds and stuff. I mean, that's true for just all sounds, though, not just necessarily a science fiction slash space themed game. I would say for the most part, in the games that I've played, though, I think they've all done a pretty good job of striking that balance. Because, like, as you say, the ambient sounds, like, I don't know too many games that have in a space setting that have ambient sounds because there's no ambient sound in space. They will cover that up with background music and sounds of other things, like another ship going by, you'll hear its jet engines, or if it's like the Rogue Squadron dogfighting games, you'll hear the other ships, the Tie Fighters, and all that stuff, and their weapons and stuff. But you won't really hear background nature sounds because there is no background nature sound in space.
Okay, let me ask this. I know you'd started to play it. Have you gotten back into Starfield yet?
Not a whole lot. It is one I need to keep go back into. I haven't really gotten back into it. I've played at least I think maybe close to a not 100, but I'd say at least 50 hours into the game.
So, how would you feel the audio design for the space portions of it are? After all, the game is called Starfield.
Yes. Yeah, it's good. Like I said, like you don't have the ambient noise when you're in space. I mean, you do and you don't because it depends on when you're in space. You can also be walking around inside your spaceship, and that will have ambient sounds of stuff depending on other crew members, and just it'll have background noises. But if you're just like in the spaceship flying around parts where you're in the cockpit and stuff, uh, I don't think there's really any ambient sound that I can remember. It's been a minute since I played it, so I could be wrong. But like you'll hear certain sounds when you get close to other, you know, celestial objects or whatever. Like there could be asteroids or other, like I said, other enemy ships or even friendly ships and stuff. Like you'll hear them as they make noise, which obviously, if you're in a third person view outside your spaceship, you wouldn't realistically wouldn't hear any of that because sound doesn't travel in space and all that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, you like to hear your engines charging up or your weapons firing and stuff and that kind of stuff. I think they did a good job with that. I haven't heard anyone complain about the audio effects in Starfield. I've heard complaints about other things for sure, but
Fair enough. Fair enough. Like, audio in general is such an interesting topic to discuss because there's music, there's sound effects, there's.
yeah, it's such a broad category.
Other than, say, licensed from movies or even comics, what game what games do you think today have the best sound effects?
Uh,
So no using any lightsabers, no using magic wands in Legacy, none of that sort of stuff, or
no,
Iron Man or
right,
whatever.
right. And I would say I think a lot of games these days, especially ones made by a major studio, do a good job with the audio effects they're trying for. Are they always perfect? No, but like the golf game I have and I play sometimes, like not very often because I'm not a huge sports guy, but like they do a good job of like they have the ambient sounds of just nature because you're out on a golf course, you're gonna hear birds chirping, stuff like that. They do a good job with the crowd noise because there are small crowds. Um, I'll say often the announcers get annoying, mostly because they just have a limited script of what they've recorded and it just starts repeating a lot. So it's just like, shut up and you turn it off.
Okay,
Um,
but what about, say,
but like,
using the golf, for example, the hitting of the ball, the
yeah,
swing stroke?
I was getting to that. Like, they do a good job of the swing stroke, which similar to we were talking about the sword earlier. It's usually a little type of sound. You hear the club swinging through the air, which if you've ever played golf or even just swung a club a few times, you can hear that sound. Um, the sound of the contact of when you hit the ball. Like some of them have gotten really advanced. Like if you do a bad shot, it's gonna play a different sound than if you hit a good shot and you hit the sweet spot of the ball. You can hear that. Obviously, or as the ball is flying through the air, they have like this little sound because you get to follow the ball and like you can in real life. And then, like if you hit something, there's the impact sound. Or like if you hit a tree or something. One thing I think they should add, which would be hilarious, since they have crowds around the greens and stuff nowadays. If you hit a person, I think it should make a noise when you hit the person. I think it would be funny, but they don't do that.
Okay, that brings up another question, slightly off topic, but in games like that, do you think the hitbox blocks the ball from hitting the crowd?
Oh no, you can clearly see when it hits a person and bounces off them and stuff. So,
But they don't have a
but
but they don't have a collision sound
they
for
they
that.
don't have a collision sound for it. So like I think it would be hilarious. Like there's no animation of when it hits the person either, which like they should include an animation, a sound effect, and something like I think it would make it funny. It would make it a little bit more realistic, obviously, because if someone's standing there and they get hit by a golf ball that a professional golfer has swung, it's gonna hurt like a son of a.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting. Or for the MLB games, if the ball goes up into the crowd and smacks someone or
Like
something.
like baseball is a little different because home runs are a thing and the ball goes into the crowd a lot more often. So most people at a baseball game are gonna have some type of glove if they're in the zones where a ball can get hit to. So
True, but I also
so they're
think that it would
like
be cool
it would be cool.
and like have, even if it's a fan in the audience catching the ball, like have a close up of the end to catch.
Yeah, I haven't played too many MLB games recently, so I don't know how in detail they do the crowds these days.
Fair enough.
Back in the day, I mean, obviously, way back in the day, they were just like little round pixels that you could never make anything out of. But more recently, like they've had basically just a flat 2D image of the crowd, and like they would show it kind of at different angles and stuff. And like I'm sure they have actual 3D models in the crowds now, but like I said, I haven't played a baseball game in a while, and whether they do any kinds of animations of them going for the catch or anything like that, I wouldn't know. Just baseball is definitely not the sport I follow.
Fair enough.
Here comes Peter
Bringing up
Cottontail.
sports games and sound effects, or even music in those games, aren't. I do wonder how a lot of the sound effects for those types of games do get recorded.
Um, that's a good question. I can't say for certain, but I would not be surprised if they actually mic'd up people in pads and said, go tackle somebody. But also, as we mentioned before, sometimes the sound you hear is just what you think it should sound like and is not actually the sound that's being made.
Exactly. But again, it's just like all of a sudden that just dawned on me. I'm like, how are these supposed to be realistic sounding effects done? Like,
Like,
again, the details that the average player just takes for granted today.
that's true. Like, I would say with the more modern games, I wouldn't be surprised if they were actual recordings of the real sounds and, using those special parabolic mics or whatever of hearing people tackle and hit each other and stuff. Versus back in the day, they were definitely all just generic sounds that they got one tackle sound and they would play the same tackle sound every time. Nowadays in the games, like the tackles sound different based on what type of tackle you're doing and stuff. So the technology is definitely advanced in my lifetime alone.
Yeah, with better technology, you get better end results.
I mean, shoot, back in the 8-bit days, the tackle was just some kind of beep sound. Boop! Because that was what they were limited to at their time.
True that.
Tecmo Bowl is a great game.
What game?
Tecmo Bowl! It's before your time, don't worry.
Obviously. So, if we look at actual franchises now, based on, yeah, the movies and such, what movie based sounds and such do you think they brought into the games really well? And which ones do you think they still need to work on?
I mean, Star Wars games are iconic for their audio. They've done a great job of replicating lightsabers and blasters and all that kind of stuff. As far as games that haven't done a very good job with it, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd say another one that did a really good job was the Spider-Man games by Insomniac. I think they did a great job of like the web shooter sounds and the little thwip noise. Like in comics, that's what the sound was actually written out as was thwip. THWIP was the sound his web shooters would make. It's obviously not the actual sound that comes out when you actually shoot a web in the video games nowadays, but like when you hear that sound, I'm like, yeah, that's totally a web shooter. Like I can't even try to reproduce the sound, but if I could play it somehow, like yeah, it's definitely like yeah, that's the web shooter sound for sure. Plus, like they do different sounds for the different types of web attacks that you do. Like the basic web swinging sound is different from like the web when you're trying to shoot a web ball at somebody and it does an impact when it hits them also and stuff and tie them up in webs and all that kind of stuff.
But
Like
do you think it's consistent from the Spider Man movies into the game? Or does the game have its own unique sound quality?
uh I'd say it's similar to what was done in some of the Spider-Man movies for sure. Like it's obviously its own thing too because these games aren't based on any of the movies. They're just Spider-Man character in general. So,
So I know you're a Marvel fan, so have you played the Avengers game?
yes, I own it. I
So how would
bought
you
it before
compare
they stopped listing it.
so how would you compare those sound effects to the movie?
Um, Again, the Avenger game is not based on the movie at all.
But in terms of quality, like, say, Iron Man's suit and how all the mechanical functions of it, does it sound like the same kind of mechanical functions in the movies? Or even though it's not supposed to be the same,
Like
but are they replicating?
it's definitely like yeah, Iron Man's armor and like the what do they call them? The arc blasts or whatever things like they have that little charge up sound and or whatever. It's very similar to what they put into the movies in the games, like and everything. Like yeah, like all those types of sounds that are associated with all your favorite Marvel characters. Thor's lightning still sounds like lightning. Hulk screaming and shouting sounds like a roar monster and all that kind of stuff.
So it still feels iconic in its own right.
Yeah, you definitely can tell like yeah, that's what it should sound like, and it definitely is very. I'm not gonna say it's the exact same sound that they used in the movies because I doubt Disney let them use the exact same sound because it's not related to. I mean, even though Disney owns Marvel, so I guess technically they have the say in it still,
Right.
but the MCU in itself is a different subsection than the video games industry and all that stuff. And actually, speaking of Spider-Man in specific, that as far as video games is all owned by Sony anyway, so they can do whatever they want and don't have to listen to Disney.
Fair.
In fact,
Very fair.
the only reason Spider-Man is in the Disney movies is because Sony said, "Yeah, we're going to do this joint thing with you where you can use Spider-Man in some of the other Spider-Man characters," which was
Good
an
enough.
unprecedented deal when that happened to two studios working together to split a character on universe and stuff because Sony doesn't just make games, they make their own movies as well. So like they're a movie
Yeah.
studio also. So like the fact that these two
Like,
major
Sony does
studios,
everything.
yes, just like Disney does everything. But the fact that these two major studios were able to come together and come to an agreement where this character can be shared between them and all that kind of stuff. That's crazy. Like most businesses are like, "No, this is mine. You can't use it. You can't make money off this thing." Even if I would make money off of it, no, it's only I'm the only one who can make money off of it.
Right.
So like, I think it's great that they came to that agreement and stuff. Like speaking of Marvel, more specifically, like the X-Men and a lot of other characters were owned by Fox, and they were not allowed to use them. Disney recently bought out that division of Fox, 20th Century Fox, and all that. So they're slowly introducing some of the X-Men stuff into Marvel, and but this is getting way off topic. So
Okay.
don't get me talking about Marvel. I'll go off on freaking rabbit trails like no one else.
How about the Lego games?
Um, you are definitely
Sounds
more knowledgeable about that than I have because you've played more of them than I have. So I will let you lead this part of the discussion. Not saying I haven't played them and I don't enjoy them. I just know you've spent more time and more like you are a bigger Lego fan than I am. Just like I'm a bigger Marvel fan than you ever will.
fair. Now, I have to say I have played many Lego games over the years. The one criticism I have in the sound effects department, in the games where you actually put Lego pieces together, it doesn't actually sound like Lego pieces being put together.
Yeah.
I don't. I've
I
always
mean,
felt like it's almost too cartoony,
yeah. Like
the sound effects.
I will say, like the Lego games generally do have a bit more of a cartoony feel than an actual realistic feel. But yeah, like it. I think I know like that. The you're talking about like when you just have a bunch of pieces and you hold the button and you build something,
Yeah,
or are you talking about like I know some of them let you actually customly build stuff in certain
all
Lego
of the
games.
above. All of the above.
Okay, I don't
Like,
know about the ones where you can actually custom build stuff and play with the pieces because I've not really played any of those games. But Yeah, the other like the Lego superhero games or Lego Batman, Lego whatever games where they have like the little things and you just hold a button and he builds stuff. Like I will admit, like it's like a very kind of fast paced click 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 kind of. I mean that's a very not quite click is not the noise, but like
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I'm trying to say. Anyone who's played
That's
games
how I
knows.
can describe it.
Anyone who's played those games know what I'm saying. Like yeah, like the sound is not actually click. That's why I'm saying, but it's like it's a click sound. Talking about sounds, it's hard to describe sound sometimes,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
which is
Like in
like
that,
amazing to me that so many games can get so many good sounds and stuff based off just like,
like
hey,
in
I need a sound that sounds like this, and then like just saying I need a click sound. Like, do you know how many different types of click sounds there could be?
exactly. And I just feel like the Lego click sounds, it's almost too cartoony. Like the games themselves are cartoony, yes, but those sound effects just take it to the next level, and it's always driven me crazy because it doesn't sound like Legos.
That's because you're cray cray. I mean, from my experience of actually playing with real Legos and stuff, there's not always a sound when you put them together. I mean, sometimes on some of the tighter ones, like you'll hear a little bit of a snap or something,
Right.
but oftentimes when you're putting some of the pieces together, you don't hear anything at all either. Or maybe my hearing's just not that good and I can't hear it.
Maybe that as well. Like all of the above could be a possibility.
Yeah, I
Like
definitely don't have as good hearing as I used to when I was a young man or a little
like in
kid.
just those games in general, I wish they would just cut down the sound effect a little bit and make it less cartoony.
Yeah, but I don't think they really could nowadays because it's such an established thing. Like so many people would be like, they changed something and it's wrong. They might not notice what it is, but since they decided to go with the more cartoony feel to those games,
That is very true.
like yeah, like something would be different, and you might not, like I said, you might not be able to place what it was, especially right away, but like so many people would be like, this is this is just wrong, and somehow it's not a proper Lego game. Like that's the thing about liking a game or a series of games, something like that, set in a common universe. The first game can oftentimes set what things are supposed to sound like, and even if like later down the line you're like, yeah, I really wish we did something different. If you change it, fans of the series are gonna be like, this is wrong. It would be like if they suddenly changed the lightsaber sounds to something similar but slightly different, and like every time you heard it, you would just be like, no, that's wrong, that's not what a lightsaber sounds like, even though obviously lightsabers are a bad example because it's not something that actually exists, but
There's a common understanding of what they're supposed to sound like.
right. So it'd be like
Yeah.
if the newest Star Wars game just made it more of a high pitched whine instead of the classic whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well, I mean, okay, I'm gonna nitpick here as well since you know Marvel, I know Star Wars. Every lightsaber has its own unique sound.
That's true. They do have their own unique sounds, but still, like when most people think of a generic lightsaber sound, they all hear pretty much that similar. Like, yeah, they'll be at different tones, frequencies, or whatever, but they all kind of sound pretty much similar when I'm just talking about the average layman listening to it.
Right.
Like, I will say, like, with Kylo Ren's lightsaber in the sequel movies, I noticed that one had a bit more of a distinct sound to it than some of
Oh
the
yeah.
other ones because of the fractured kyber crystal. They even gave it in universe reason why it sounded and looked different. It wasn't a solid blade. It was more that jaggedy looking plasma
Yep. Yep.
thing. So, like, yeah, like those are definitely things. But even like then, a lot of people were like, "That's not what a lightsaber's supposed to sound like."
Speaking of sounds, something else that we've touched on. indirectly. But going back to the Lego topic, something that changed at one point, I forget which game it was, I feel like Batman, they actually introduced legit voice acting.
Yeah.
So, how about voice acting in games? Like, that's another concept for audio design.
Yes, it is. And tying that into older games, like, just wasn't possible back in the days because, they couldn't actually put in actual recorded audio. They had, I remember a lot of the old games I used to play, they had like, womp, 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 almost kind of like the Charlie Brown teacher type of thing. And
Yep.
it would be text showing up on the screen of what they were saying. Whereas, like you say, nowadays, a lot of games actually do have voice acting. I mean, not all. Some still do the text based, talking and stuff. And yeah, like speaking of, including voice acting, the Fallout series has had voice acting for a long time. When most of them, your character was the silent protagonist, so like you would get to select what they say, but there was no voice actor for it. But
Right.
Fallout 4 had a voice actor that would, one, it was always kind of made a lot of people mad because you get to pick what you say, and then the actual line the guy says is slightly different or, different from what you pick. And like a lot of people did not like the introduce of a voiced character protagonist. Like they always much preferred the silent protagonist so you could just like it's your own voice in your own head whether you're a male or female character or whatever. They had it for both.
Right.
But yeah, like so like the voice protagonist thing in Fallout, like that was a major thing that a lot of people of the Fallout series did not like. I'm sure there were people out there who did like it, but I would say the major consensus is this was a bad idea.
That's actually really interesting.
Like they didn't mind everyone else talking and everything. Like obviously, like they don't want to read everything, but like as a voice protect, like I'm hit and miss. Like if a game and if it's a series like the Fallout was, where it's like you've always been the silent protagonist, then just suddenly in the new game have a voice protagonist. I'm like, yeah, it's not right. It's no, don't do that. Don't change what it was. Like we were saying, a certain sound effect can be iconic with that game. So like it was iconic that you were the silent protagonist or whatever. There was no voice actor for your character.
So it was more iconic with the lack of audio.
Yeah, with the lack of audio for just your character. Obviously, everyone else and everything else, the in-game audio has always been great, and they do a spot-on job with that. But yeah, like the voice protagonist thing, it's kind of weird sometimes, especially if a game or even a studio is just not known for doing that.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, how much? So, did the who was that? Bethesda?
Yeah.
Did they end up going back to the silent protagonist after the backlash?
Um, Fallout 5 has not come out yet, so it.
Um,
I know
where
they had
does
76 came out, but
yeah?
that's I want to say I haven't played it much. I don't remember if 76 had a voiced protagonist or not. I've only played it a few times myself. I can look it up though.
Well, you are the Bethesda person between the two of us.
Yes. Overall, no. I mean, you can hear your character make sounds when you get like hit or something. There's the oof kind of a things or whatever, or you'll hear a breath or something every once in a while. But as an actual voiced, who says things, no.
Okay.
They decided to go back.
So they got enough backlash on number 4 that moving forward, they're like, hey, let's not upset the apple cart. Let's go back to the tried and true.
Yes.
That's actually really interesting.
The better example of them going back to it would be in Starfield. They don't really have a voiced protagonist. There might be a couple of
Really?
yeah. It's back to the quiet.
Is that a
things.
trend with a lot of Bethesda games with
Yes,
the
like
voiceless?
yes, Bethesda's like all the Elder Scrolls. You've always been the silent protagonist and everything. So
Do you think for some games that is a good formula? Or do you think some games should have a voice?
I think certain games like Bethesda is known for the RPG type games. I'm like, uh, if you are going to have a voiced protagonist, give the player options on what the voice can be, which I know means like you're going to add so many more audio files for how many uh, voices you have, and in a huge game like anything Bethesda makes, that's not really possible because it would double, triple, quadruple the size of the game for just the audio files alone. So, um, one of the cool things about Starfield is if you have a generic enough name, they will say your name after you enter it. Whereas, like at the beginning of the game, when you're creating your character and you type in your name, and after you meet this robot and you become the captain of your first ship, the robot will say Captain, and if your name is in the list of names that they have re-recorded, it will actually say your name. So like I could be Captain David and it would say Captain David, welcome to whatever, versus more uncommon names. They just call you Captain and then leave the a blank, they don't call in an actual name. So
Right.
it's kind of cool. I like games that do that. Like stuff like that has been around for a while, where you can sometimes they actually show you the list of what and you can pick from the name to
Yep.
have your thing. Is like that was the more common thing. Whereas with Starfield, like you just type in your name like you normally would on when you're creating a character, and if your name is on that list, which I'm sure somewhere out there is a list of whatever all the names are. You could get them to say, you could find out what it would say your name. But like, yeah, the first time I was playing it, like knew about that feature because I had been following Star Wars. So I'm like, yeah, the first time I played it, I made up some name for my character, and yeah, they just called me Captain. And then one of the I built another character later because the first time you build a character in some of these games, you realize this is not the kind of character I want to play. I need to rearrange my stats or whatever. Second time I picked, I just used David, and so like Captain David. So I was like, oh, he finally said my name. That's so cool.
No,
it, it's simple things that can give players pleasure like that sometimes.
no, when developers do that sort of thing, I find it frustrating if they have a secret list of names that they don't make readily available.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure the Starfield one. Like if you Google it, you can find out what's all on the list. I remember seeing something talking about the list of names, whether that was one that Bethesda themselves put out or just something that like people that play these games they'll like go through and test a bunch of stuff to see if
Right.
that name will work or whatever.
Yeah, no, with Hogwarts Legacy, you pick your own name, like you type out your own name
Hmm.
or whatever, and then they always address you as, oh, you're the fifth year. You're the new fifth year. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Like they never address you by name. You're never given the chance to pick a name that might be in a database.
Yeah, the same's
Um,
true for games like Skyrim or even the Fallout games. Fallout games, you're usually called the Vault Dweller or something like that, or sometimes you'll get another in-universe nickname. But in Skyrim, they call you the Dragonborn all the time. That's your character's name. You're just the Dragonborn, no matter what name you pick. So
and while I find that to be cool, I also would like it to have that extra level of interactivity of let's be able to pick a name that you get to be called to make it more personal to you as the player.
yeah, like sports games have been working on that a lot, like with the name recognition because people put in their names. Like whenever my brother plays the basketball or football games, he can make himself because he's got a very common last name and it's one that's easily said. I was born after my parents were married, so I have my father's last name. He still has my mother's maiden name for his last name, so I have a different last name. And yeah, there's no game that will ever say my name. I'm not expecting any game to ever get my last name right because it's such a
Right.
rare and unique last name. Most people that read it can't even say it correctly. So
But yeah, like that's one thing that I do like about the two newest Forza Horizon games. You pick a player name from a list of names that they have, and they'll address you by name, which,
Yeah.
again, it's that extra level of personalization
Mhm.
that I'm just like, thank you. Let's keep doing this. Like, let's have all games do that.
Yeah, like I understand not all game is doing that because, like I said, it depends on how much time, plus it would cost more money to pay the different voice actors to record each possible name and all this kind of a thing. But yeah, there's an old Xbox game that I like to play with my brother sometimes, and it's NHL Hits.
Right?
And when you create your hockey players in that game, because we always do the custom team mode, because that's the only fun way to play. Like he can make his guy, and his last name is one of the names that you could pick, or maybe not his last name, but my brother's name is Chris, so he can pick Chris as the name that the announcers will say. Or my friend, like he can pick his name of Frankie and all this kind of stuff. My guy, they don't even
Right.
have David for some reason, which like surprises me.
What?
Like, yeah, like David is such a popular name. Like, how do they not have David?
Like that? I
But
wouldn't say popular, but I'd say just common.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's such like it's a very common name. But like the fact that they didn't have David available made me mad. But the guy I make, like in NHL hits, it's not normal hockey. It's 3-on-3 hockey, and you're hitting people a lot more. And like, so I'm always the guy that runs around and checks people, and I get in fights all the time, which my brother laughs at. So I named my guy Mr. Marbles, which is one of the names you can pick,
Wow.
because I'm always getting in fights and knocking people out.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's like it's always funny. Like at the end of a game or the after, you can check your season stats or whatever of how many things. Like I have an exorbitant amount of penalties because I'm always getting into fights. That's the fun part of the game for me. Is you get in a little fight and then you go into this little basically really limited mini boxing game with the two guys boxing each other out on the ice.
Right.
And then if you win the fight, you knock that player out of the game and you still go to the penalty box for like 30 seconds or whatever for getting into a fight. If you lose the fight, you get knocked out of the game and have to pick a backup player for when you come back in after the penalty is over.
Interesting.
It's a fun game. Like I don't like hockey at all, but I love that old NHL hits game on the original Xbox. It's great.
So, what were the sound effects like for that game?
Uh, they were pretty good. A lot of it, like it's definitely that it's made by Midway Games, so it's one of those over the top, not realistic type of games, kind of like NBA Jam with the announcer who'd always go boom shakalaka and all that kind of stuff. And so like the announcers are like some of the main stuff from that game. But yeah, like they had sound effects for the different types of shots. Like a slap shot would sound different than like your basic things, and then some of the sounds were, like I said, realistic. Other times they were just kind of like not exactly old 8-bit tones, but they would be like a whoop or whatever type of sound for certain things. Um, Sometimes when you check people, if you're right up against the glass, you can check them through the glass and you'll hear the glass shatter and stuff.
Oh, cool.
So like yeah, like it's definitely over the top, not realistic to hockey at all and everything, which is one of the reasons they had to stop making it is because like oh this is not how hockey's played. They used to have NFL Blitz too, which was basically the football version of that, and you would go out and smash the crap out of people with the tackles, and you could keep tackling them over and over again after the play was over. But eventually,
Yeah, yeah.
whiny parents were complaining about all the violence in games, so they stopped making those series of games and stuff, which is very sad for fans of those old games.
And yet they continue to make violent games to this day.
Like some of the games, the actual violence in games nowadays is way worse than. But the other thing was like the actual organizations, the NFL and the NHL and all those professional sports leagues, did not want that violence associated with them. Whereas, like in a real football game or something, if you did that, you would definitely get penalized and stuff. And it was encouraged in those games to do that kind of stuff.
Okay. I can see it under those grounds, but under parents being upset about too much violence in video games, nah, no.
I always think it's funny when they talk about the violence in video games. You have no problem plopping their children in front of a screen and like, are you seeing the violence on television and movies nowadays? It's way worse.
This is a good time to wrap things up. So, do you have any updates you want to share on Match 3 game developments, or do you want to leave that as a surprise for another day?
Um, well, the latest update is I've added scoring to it. Like I've still got a way to go. There's different tiles and stuff. I have a very limited playable demo available on Simmer website. We can leave the link to that in the description if people are interested. Yeah, it's the first game that we're working on as a studio. It's by no means gonna be groundbreaking in any way.
Including any fancy sound effects?
I don't have sound effects yet. That is one of the next steps I'm going to be implementing on is adding sound to the game, including background music, sound effects, special sounds when like you get a match, there'll be a sound. When you get one of the bombs things, it'll play a different sound. Like I'm working on it. I need to start working on the sounds. Like it's been on my mind the last couple of days of what kind of sounds I'm gonna include.
Okay. Well, folks, there you go. So, this week we discussed sound effects, music. We may circle back to this topic another day, but that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, ring that bell, make sure you're getting all your notifications.
Subscribe. You missed subscribe
Thank you. Subscribe.
because you have to subscribe
In
before you
fact,
can ring the bell.
in fact, a lot of our views so far on the episodes we've released, I can promise you there's only a couple people who've subscribed compared to the people who are viewing it. So start subscribing and start sharing, please.
Yes, let's get those analytics up.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Hope you have a good week. We'll catch you next week.